Okay, well, we are doing the quick turnover, and I have a new thing for you all today. No slides on this presentation. This is just a nice chat between myself. I'm Sid Maestre. I work with APIMatic, leading their developer relations, and I'm here with,
Greg Chan, CTO of Akoya. Nice to meet everyone.
and I'm going to be asking Greg all the questions. So I've got the easy job here today. And the topic is going beyond the hype and realizing value from consumer trust and business value through your open banking APIs.
Sounds good.
All right. So thanks for coming today, everyone. First question for you, Greg. Can you share Akoya's vision and how it aligns with the future of open finance?
I feel like I'm in a game show right now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Akoya. We were founded 5 years ago, and we've been built on this mission of really empowering everyone to take better control of their finances by giving them control of their data. And so the way we accomplish this is really helping leading financial institutions, technology companies to be able to provide secure data access for their customers. And so we were founded on this core principle of really putting customer and security first, right? And I think the security part that we focus on really led us down a path where we built the only 100% API based data access network, right? So we really stayed away from screen scraping. I think as most of I would say when Acquire first came into the scene, screen scraping was very much the common and traditional way of data aggregation, right? And I think you all know that you heard from some of the earlier talks how it's really kind of unsafe and insecure way of getting data. And so we really stayed away from that. And yeah, I do think it really aligns well with some of the topics today around open finance and of course the 1033 rule, where you can see the shift now away from screen scraping onto more permission API access. And so Akoya is really just serving as a critical utility in this ecosystem, helping fintechs and financial institutions.
That's great. And I've been around for a while myself. I got my start in Deborah at PayPal, and then I spent many years at Zero, where connecting to banks and screen scraping was a constant issue for us. So I'm happy to hear what you guys are doing. I know there's a lot going on in open finance right now. It feels like we're getting some momentum here. So I wanted to ask you, what excites you most about this current moment we're in with open finance?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really exciting time to be in open finance, right? When you think about open banking and then evolving to open finance, right? And then, just Mr. Open Banking slide earlier around what was it, FDX, seeing just a tremendous amount of adoption, right? With like 114 million active connections. You look back at what spring 2021, it was 16 million connections. So this is all, kind of market driven demand that really existed and is continuing to go before even any regulation or rule was in place. So I do think that's a very interesting thing that we're seeing. And I think what it does is by establishing a standardized and secure ecosystem, it's really kind of leveling the playing field so that it doesn't matter if you're like a small, tiny, scrappy startup or they're very large financial institutions, you're going to be able to innovate on behalf of consumers who are always looking for better, more personalized, richer financial services and solutions. So I think, really it's a win for everyone, right? Of course, it's a win for fintechs. It's a win for financial institutions who are going to have, better security control and transparency of their customers' data. And of course, it's a win for consumers, right? Who's going to have a lot more options to pick from. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done a really great job just setting the stage here for what Okoya is doing, the importance of FDX and these new standards. But I think what everybody's always asking themselves is around these use cases, these real world use cases. So I'd love to hear from you and Okoya's perspective. What are some of the most compelling real world use cases for open finance that you guys are observing?
yeah, you definitely heard some of this earlier, but just a little bit. Koya had, we work with fintechs, other data aggregators, or providers, financial institutions. So we see a lot of interesting use cases kind of come through. there's kind of your traditional use cases that are, like PFM or personal finance management, that you continue to see. Although now I think it's interesting because with AI, you're seeing AI layered on top of that, where you have more like predictive, insights into someone's personal finance, or, like a financial advisor, AI chatbot, right? Like, so those are kind of interesting. Um, Account linking and account funding is another one, right? So how you do KYC and ID verification on a consumer before you go fund their, say digital wallet or crypto exchange, right? Payment initiation is another one where you're checking a customer's balance before you initiate a payment. Um, so those are some of the more traditional ones. I would say there's newer use cases over the last few years, also kind of like the emergent use cases. Uh, Pay by bank, right? Embedded payments is another one, right? So how you give a really seamless and integrated customer experience where they're making a payment directly in the app that they're using, right? Starbucks app is a good example. DoorDash, Uber's, um, you know, cash flow underwriting was touched on earlier, right? Like that's another really interesting one where you're now able to basically get a wider range of someone's financial information beyond just like the credit history to be able to make a better, risk assessment of somebody before you give them a loan. Fraud prevention is another one. So yeah, there's just a lot out there. I mean, I can go on and on, but there's really just a lot of really compelling use cases. And that's what I think why it's such a market and a consumer driven, push right now, because the customers are the ones wanting these services and solutions out there.
Yeah, those sound great. I mean, I think the AI piece is the one that people are their imaginations are really going because I know when they start talking about agents, you I don't know, my mind went to travel agents. So people are always thinking, I need to go tell this agent to go and scour, all of the airlines, find me the best ticket at the best price, and then actually buy it for me. And I think open banking might help with that.
Absolutely.
So can you elaborate on the core principles behind your secure data sharing APIs? And I think you touched on this already, and how they really differentiate from those traditional methods of screen scraping, because I think that's pretty important for people to understand.
Yeah, and by the way, probably a lot of experts here already, so sorry if this is kind of basic information, but when we think about screen scraping, the data aggregator is going to need to get the username, password, login credentials for the customer, right? With API permission access, you don't have to do that, right? Another example is, with screen scraping, you're going to be able to, as an aggregator, get a customer's data, right? Meaning transactions, account information, all of that. There could be some PII in there. And so that data is being stored. Whereas in API access, you don't store data. Like Akoya does not store any of the customer's data. We're just a pass through that returns the data to a data recipient. I think it was touched on earlier around like secondary use of data, right? Like so, uh, with screen scraping, a third party is able to resell your data or use it for secondary purposes, but in API access, like we're not going to do that, right? And so, there's a lot of yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting cases there. I will also add that, like, I think for when you're talking about like OAuth tokenized access more specifically, having the token is really powerful because you're able to allow the consumer to specify like fine grained permissions now, right? So it's not, you kind of avoid this overfetching, right? Where you can actually, as a customer, say, I actually only want to share this scope of data. And then also the token is time bound, right? So it's not like I'm using an app once and then I forget about it, but actually that third party app keeps scrape data for me, right? So, being able to manage and revoke the consent is very powerful, right? Whether you're the consumer or if you're the financial institution who no longer want to grant access to a third party. So there's a lot of powerful things with the new way of but basically the non-screen scraping way of getting data. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine in the past that the end customer didn't really care how the app got its banking data. They just wanted the app to work, right?
Yeah.
And I imagine when you're building these kind of APIs, you got to think about what's the smart default, because a lot of the customers are just going to click okay, consent, consent. And so I imagine that's part of it as well, is the folks who are asking for this data need to think about what's the minimum amount that I can take because I got to respect that consent.
That's right. And having the OAuth token access will help improve the authorization disclosure as well. So you're very upfront about what data is being shared, right? So that's another really big improvement.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit more. I feel like you're right. We have a lot of experts in the room. So I hope the questions aren't too elementary here, but 1033,
Yeah.
it's often positioned as compliance. So this is really significant for the US. I want to know, how is Akoya's 1033 solution working, with these financial institutions and the customers? I mean, we're talking about the benefits.
Yeah. Look, at first, I think if you're an FI and you're looking at all the obligations for 1033, and I know there's a huge question mark around the compliance piece, but really look at it as like, how do you get into open bank, right? That's really, I think, when you look at all the requirements of 1033, where it's useful. And there are a number of obligations, right, for financial institutions, whether that is, covered data and being able to, make that accessible through a hosted developer interface, having a developer portal to manage your third parties, to have the third party manage their access, policies, procedures, there's performance requirements, third party risk management. So there, tech support, customer support. So there's a ton of things that you need to think through. And what Akoya is providing is really an end-to-end open banking solution, right? That will not only, meet your compliance, but we want to go beyond like checking a box for you, right? We want to help you as a financial institution get into the open banking space and be able to get value of that and help your customers with that. So, for example, when I say like end-to-end solution, it really covers kind of all of the things that you would need to think about. Like, we will integrate with whatever legacy system you have in your corporation and be able to take that and host developer interface for you. We have a developer portal which we can white label based on the bank's branding. There's performance requirements which will help meet. So there's a number of things that we're providing. And I was thinking one thing I want to call out is, and often this gets missed, is the third party risk management operations, right? Which is not trivial. Right? Like when you're providing a hosted developer interface, there is going to be third parties that are going to be asking for access. And you're going to need to do your due diligence. You're going to need to do security risk reviews. Uh, you're going to need to collect evidence, right, for a third party to be able to make an assessment of like, is this a safe third party to give access? And so, these operations you can do yourself, or you can basically delegate to Akoya, and we'll do it for you with our security and risk.
Interesting. So you're really enabling these financial institutions to meet that compliance without having to build this all in house. And do you have like a way for them to allow their customers to then revoke access, control that consent as well?
Absolutely, right? That's one of the things we're offering is the consent management dashboard, right? Which basically lets their consumers go and be able to manage that. And it's also backed by APIs that the financial institutions can call directly to us to manage as well. So yeah, that's definitely one of the features.
Cool. That's great. And this question really goes to the heart of my career, which is, do I build or do I buy, right? Am I gonna like roll my own solution? And so I'm just wondering, for some of those, financial institutions that think that, yeah, I want to do this myself, like what are some advice you can offer them? Because that might be the right thing for them.
Yeah, it could be the right thing. I would say, there's definitely a lot of challenges that you want to think through and have your eyes wide open, right? You don't want to get into it and then realize it's too much. So, I think in terms of technical challenges, depending on your tech stack, right? If it's a very kind of legacy tech stack with, like a monolithic architecture or some legacy complex system, you're going to need to modernize that to be a more RESTful API architecture, right? You need to really think about security, authentication, authorization, right? Thinking about implementing OAuth 2.0, MTLS, really hardening your infrastructure, because remember, you're now exposing an external endpoint, right? That, we saw earlier about all the potential security threats that are out there, right? So how do you harden your infrastructure such that, you have the right API gateway, right? You're hardening your access controls, your firewall, right? So all of that stuff you have to think through, and then making sure you have like threat detection, monitoring, all of that is really important. We touched on consent management, right? That's another piece that you're going to have to think through. Uh, I would say, uh, data standardization is another one, right? That we've heard, we've seen as a challenge, because as a financial institution, you may have data that's kind of like spread across different data sources, right? And they could be in different formats. And so you're going to need to take all of that, transform that into clean, structured data that is aligned with the FBX specs. And that takes work. And then the last thing I'll add on the tech side is really performance and scale, right? You're gonna need to like you have an API endpoint that could be handling a high volume of API traffic. So, and by the way, you have to meet the 99.5% availability, and it should have good response time too, right? So you need to do stress testing, load testing, think about auto scaling, load balancing, caching, right? API rate limiting. Um, we found that like the database read write operation sometimes it can be a bottleneck, right? So thinking through that. So, anyways, a lot of things to think about from the technical side. And I won't go into it too long, but the non-technical stuff as well, right? Like I mentioned, the third-party risk management, and really just it requires pretty much every function in your organization to coordinate on this, right? It's not just touching engineering or product. It's really across the board. All your job functions needs to be contributing to this.
Yeah, and I imagine, like you mentioned, developer portal, being able to have that available as well. So I'd like to um, pivot a little bit into developer experience. So creating a really great developer experience is crucial when you want to drive adoption around any API. So I'm just wondering, what are some key initiatives that Akoya is undertaking to ensure that your developers find your APIs are really easy to work with?
Yeah. I would say offering a great developer experience is actually one of the key differentiators, because you're really lowering the barrier to entry for, whether it's fintechs or financial institutions to get into the open finance space, right? If you have a great developer experience, it's going to take them less time, less costs, less effort to integrate, right? So it is something that we really focus on. And so, some of the initiatives we have, there's kind of like the fundamental stuff, of course, like good documentation, API specs, SDKs, and code samples. We also provide a sandbox environment. Testing is super important for third parties, right? Before they push things into production. And so, we have, for example, a test, like a fictitious bank backed by a test server with test data that a third party can go and try things out, right? And then we have various testing tools for them to use. I think having, I mentioned the self-service dev portal part, there's a lot of capabilities in there to empower the third-party developers, right? Being able to generate an API key, client, credentials, provisioning, things like that. And just one last thing I'll add is troubleshooting and debugging is really important, right? So making sure you have the right logs, error message, error codes. Those are all like sometimes the little things that is going to help give, a great developer experience.
Yeah, I was going to say, anything you can do to reduce those barriers to entry. They'll put a login screen in front of your docs, that sort of thing. Um, and I can vouch for their sandbox. APIMatic, we've partnered with you to help with your developer experience, and we've been getting excited about MCP servers. And so our team quickly got on board and said, "Well, what API can we play with?" And Okoya's sandbox is great. So I've seen your consent screen a few times when I played with it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around Akoya partnering with APIMatic, and can you discuss the rationale behind this partnership and what specific benefits this collaboration is going to create for your developers?
Yeah, absolutely. first off, I would say having a great developer experience is really an ongoing investment, right? It's something you have to kind of foster and nurture over time as you're building new features and so on and so forth. And so, we're always focused on like providing great developer content. And so I think the partnership with APIMatic made a lot of sense because, we're leveraging your proven expertise in really, coming up with the right developer content for API-based products. Now, what that does for Akoya is actually frees up our time so we can also build more features for customers, right? So, we like to be kind of lockstep with you where, as we're developing new features, we're working with you to make sure that there's also the great developer content, code samples, SDKs that are following that. And so that's kind of been the rationale for us, and so far it's been great.
Yeah. No, you guys have an amazing team. We're really enjoying the partnership, and it's a great give and take. So we love getting that feedback. So we make sure the product is aligned with your future roadmap. Um, so I- I'm not sure how we're doing on time. 4 minutes. Okay, perfect. So we've got a few questions to wrap this up. So I'd love for you to share what's one key takeaway that you'd like this audience to remember about Akoya's role in this future of open finance.
Yeah, I actually think it was touched on earlier, but the key takeaway I think is that open banking, open finance is really here to stay, right? And it is primarily a consumer driven market, we think, right? Because there's going to be value and ROI in there beyond just compliance. And so I would suggest, like, if you're not already kind of, in the space, that you should definitely proactively look into it. Um, as far as Akoya goes, look, I mean, I think I would like to think we played some part in contributing to it with our stance on security and being a API based network. Um, yeah, I'm happy to chat with anyone who's interested to learn more.
Yeah. So, and I just want to say it's great to hear that you guys have taken that step to lead with APIs first and making it a secure and rich experience for customers. And where can the attendees come and find you other than after this talk? Do you have a booth or something?
This whole row over there?
Oh,
No, kidding. So go to Korean.com. That's the best way. And then, of course, you can reach out to any of us to chat. Happy to talk about more open finance stuff. So.
all right. Well, Greg, thanks for coming on and doing the little fireside chat with me today. I really enjoyed it and hope to continue the conversation with all you here.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks.